David Levene. Thank you very much for joining us.
A pleasure.
Oompher is all about inspiring people to achieve extraordinary things. So who and what during your life and career has inspired you?
Well, I guess what inspired me was my father, in a way. Well, not in a way, he did inspire me. He came from a family of 13 in the northeast of England. There were 7 boys and 6 girls. And the 7 boys left school when they were 10. They were qualified journeymen, as painters and paper hangers, working for my grandfather for 2 and 6pence a week, plus the 2 and 6pence, that's 25 cents, but it was worth more in those days, of course, a week, plus found is board and lodging. The 7 boys all went into the army in the First World War. A couple of them got killed. Dad came out of the army and eventually decided that he would emigrate. So at the age of late 20s, he left England and everything he'd ever known, more or less. Well, all he'd known was the trenches in France, and he came to New Zealand. And the family had given him £20 to make his fortune in the colonies. So he ran a Crown and Anchor board on board the ship. The Crown and Anchor is a gambling game, I don't really know. And he landed in Wellington with 2 and 3pence. And from there he went down to South Island and to a timber mill. It's still there today, I think, at Ruatapu. And he came back to Wellington after he had an accident with a saw, into the trade, and then he came up to Auckland in some Christmas holidays and met my mother, and I guess that was the end of the good life. He had to settle down. But I thought that to leave England, everything you know, your family, and on your own, come out to another world and to have nothing, and I think that inspired me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and he obviously got into business when he was over here as well. And
well, one of his brothers came,
okay,
and the 2 of them set up as painting contractors, and they worked at that. And then during the slump, the big recession of the 20s, early 30s, they decided that they couldn't really make ends meet as contractors. So by then they had a little shop where their wives looked after the little shop, because they managed, not that they did much business in it, or virtually none, but they got their white lead and oil and things a little cheaper because it was, they got them from wholesalers. And so they gave up their contracting and they developed the shop a little bit, and they started framing pictures and they made a living until later on in the 30s, when things came a little better and life improved a little.
Yeah, and you got into the family business in 1947, and then in 1952, I guess, came in and took over the management and as a 23-year-old, so very, very young. So when you were growing up yourself, did you have an interest in business?
Well, I guess I had an interest in business, and that I always, in the school holidays, I used to go in and weigh up turpentine and putty and all that sort of stuff. And I learned to serve customers, and I guess it taught me a little bit about trading and what have you. I was an only child, and my mother had spoiled me, and my dad, in his wisdom, decided that I should go to a boarding school.
Okay.
So, at the age of 13, I set off to New Plymouth, where I went to boarding school there, and after the first few weeks, when I realised that there was somebody else in the world but me, I had a wonderful time in those years at boarding school.
Yeah.
And well, there's still some of my friends from those days that I'm in contact with, and lot of them are dead. You know.
Yeah. You do make a lot of good friends at boarding school, don't you?
Well, I did, because
Yeah.
for the first time I sort of had brothers, and it was really quite special for me. In retrospect, you know, at the time it was just your life. But,
Yeah. So then I guess once you came into the family business over the next 40 years, you grew it into when you sold it with 52 retail stores, and it sort of become a household name and a huge company. So what do you put that incredible growth down to?
Well, the first thing was that I never set out to make money as such. I set out to survive. I set out for I sort of, I guess, was looking for security for my family and for my people. My people have always been extremely important to me.
So staff within the business?
Yeah, the people. That I never had anybody working for me. I only had people working with me.
Okay.
And so that was the thing that I chased, was security. And I believed that it was very necessary to support my people, which I did, and help them do their jobs and so on. And you know, we built a business over time with a great culture, where it was a family business. Even though in the finish we had perhaps 1,000 people, it was a family business, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody talked with me, everybody, everybody mixed in. It was just a very good setup.
Yeah, brilliant. And in 1959 you went over to the USA to learn about retail stores and so on.
Well, yes, I was just coming 30, I guess, and I went away overseas. That was my first trip overseas.
Right.
And I went for 6 months, sort of hopping from country to country, and spent a couple of months with a friend going through Europe, and then I went to the States, and I went and did a course with the National Cash Register Company.
Okay.
It was Modern Merchandising, it was called, and it was run by a man called Bernardo Trujillo, wonderful guy, and he was a Colombian. And that week taught me the future of New Zealand retailing.
Okay.
It taught me that there were going to be such things as discounters, shopping centres, how important parking was, and just sort of the basics of what New Zealand has become.
Okay. So you learnt a lot during that trip that you
Huge
within your own
amount.
business?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I went, it was a little business. When I first went into it that first year in 47, our sales were £10,000. It's like $20,000. So it was a very, very small, sort of a little retail shop, if you know what I mean. And one of the things that I did early was used to have great arguments with my father and uncle, because I said to them, look, you have been in business virtually as long as Smith & Smith's, Tingy and Company, Guthrie Barron, Phillipson, these big companies. And I said, you've got a little tiddly shop up in Kranga Happy Road. Look what they've got. They've got New Zealand-wide companies. And I said, it's because you don't sell to the trade.
Okay.
And they said, oh, yeah, going to sell to the trade, give them credit. They'd been painters. They knew how hard it was at the end of the line. So anyway, eventually I prevailed, and that was at the age of about 22, 23, that I remember my father saying to me one day, right, he said, you go and do it your way. If we lose everything, there wasn't that much to lose, mind you, but if we lose everything, it's on your shoulders. Well, I'm happy to say we didn't lose everything, and we managed to scramble through.
Yeah, absolutely. And from having, I guess, spent time in the States and learning about business over there, are there some things that you observed that the Americans did really, really well at business that maybe we didn't do so well here in New Zealand?
Well, in those days, there was no such thing here as shopping centres or discounters. I mean, our country was sort of rather restricted from an import control type of thing. There was sort of shortages of goods, and the people with the licenses made the money. You know, with the import licenses thing. You know, it was a different sort of a thing. When I went there and saw what would happen, I came back to New Zealand and I approached a number of retailers here in Auckland who I thought were pretty good.
Yeah.
And I said to these people, why don't we start our own shopping centres? Instead of having developers make shopping centres, why don't we as a group get together? We won't have to pay the huge rents and All of them said to me the same thing. It'll never happen in New Zealand. So I knew that it would.
Yeah.
You know, I believed it. Well, I didn't know, but I believed it would. And so I borrowed money. I had no money. I borrowed money and I got some old properties down behind George Court's off Karinga Happy Road in France Street. I built a building, and apart from Tom Archie's first supermarket out in Otahu, it was the only business that had parking, and that's what it was built on. And in our first year, we doubled our sales,
Wow.
which was no big deal because the sales weren't that wonderful, do you know what I mean? But it was
Still a good achievement.
It proved the point.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a lot of mortgage, but it proved the point.
Yeah. Okay. And from your experience in business, what were some of the key things I guess you learned that you always kept at the forefront of the way that you operated in business? So some of your, I guess, ethics and so on that you learned in business.
Firstly, you know, people are everything. People are the importance of people. You must have people who are on the same wavelength that you are. You must support them and help them. You know, as I said earlier, people didn't work for me, they worked with me. And I must say that it's very important to, from my point of view, to have that thing right. That's the first and foremost thing. And then there's lots of other things. You have to concentrate on your customer. Your business should be driven by your customers, and that still applies in many things I'm involved in today. And the people are the sort of that first basic that needs to be right.
Okay. And you spend a lot of time when you're in business, obviously going around the different shops and interacting with your people and customers. Was that really important for growing such a?
Well, from my opinion, it was hugely important.
Yeah.
It meant that anybody in this, working with us, could talk to me and did talk to me. And I would go to stores for a day on a Saturday or something and serve customers all day. And some of my people would say, "What are you doing that for? You own the place. You don't have to stand on your feet." I said, "Well, I do it, one, because I like it, and two, because I really find out what's going on from the customers and from you people talking to you. Whereas, you sit up in your ivory tower, you don't know what's happening."
Yeah, exactly. And just to talk a wee bit about business today, after selling Levene's about 17 years ago now, probably? 20 years ago, wow, okay. What's your primary focus today, Sir David?
Well, I guess my primary focus today is still security.
Yeah.
I mean, really, there's no such thing. We're going to die, and that's that. But I want good things for my children, my grandchildren, and those that follow. So that's one of the things that I think is very important. Another one, I've been very fortunate. I've had a very good life, and New Zealand has been very kind to me. And so I feel that I'm very happy to give back. And we have a charitable foundation, and we give away, what by my standards anyway, it seems to be a fair bit of money. And the other thing is, now I very much enjoy working with young people. I find that if I only mixed with my contemporaries, you hear a lot about their health and their disabilities and things. And it's pretty hard to get them off that subject.
Yeah.
But when I'm with young people that I'm involved in the business world,
Yep.
that doesn't enter into it. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
We talk about things.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm happy to find a good young person and make sure that they are the right person with a good idea. And we'll form a company. I might have 25, 50% or something, but it'll only be a little company of perhaps $10,000, $20,000. And then we will just put money in at a cheap rate, and the businesses grow. Some of them fail, you don't win them all, but you keep trying.
Yeah, and you've been involved with so many different types of business through investing, from horticulture to high-tech startups and property investing and television production and so on. So what would your advice be to somebody looking at actually getting into investing themselves? Is it a hard game?
Well, I guess there are probably different ways of investing.
Yeah.
When I sold the business, for the first time in my life, I had money. By that I mean I'd always been able to live comfortably and bring my family up and so on, but I didn't have any money as such, because no matter what we made, it all went back into the business. That was that's where it all went. So all of a sudden I had this lump of money, and I wondered what to do. So I kept when I sold the business, I kept the properties and got rent for them from the business. Now, the people that bought the business messed it up in 4 years, it had gone. So the thing I had to learn then, I had to learn a bit about property, because I thought I knew about property initially. If it looks a bit scruffy, paint it, and if it's leaks, get a plumber. Well, I assure you there's a lot more to it. And I managed to get people around me, with me too, who did have the proper knowledge and who do have the proper knowledge to this day. And so that was sort of how I got into investing. The other thing I did, I decided that I would not borrow money. Now, all of my business life I borrowed money from the banks, the insurance companies, and all the rest of it. I sold my business on a Wednesday night. On Thursday morning I went out and paid off all the mortgages on the properties. It may not have been that quick, but in principle it was. And then I determined not to borrow money. And I still have that philosophy. I'm sure that our portfolios and businesses and everything could be lot bigger if I was prepared to give, but I'm not. I don't. It's a very good feeling. All of the years that I had borrowed money, there's a responsibility in business, in my opinion. The people that you employ need to be paid. So you've got to pay your people, and you've got to keep everything going. You've got to pay the rents and the vehicles, and all the stuff that goes with running businesses. And I sort of feel that that's important to me. And it was a real load off my shoulders when I didn't have debt. And to this day, it's good to feel that I don't have debt.
Yeah,
So you asked me how people could get into investing. Well, if they've got some money, they can get into investment. If they haven't got any money, I guess they've got to borrow to get into investment. It's a very risky business. I'm not saying that it won't work, because I did it myself for all those years ago. But that's how I feel about it.
So in terms of property, you mentioned how I guess you surrounded yourself by people who knew a lot about it, and you obviously learned a lot off them. So is that always a good way for people if they're looking at getting into, say, investing, to learn from some people who have been here?
The first thing you've got to do is know what you want to do. So everybody wants to say, I want to be an investor. How do you want to be an investor? Do you want to invest in a business? Do you want to invest in a farm? Do you want to invest in properties? I mean, what do you want to invest in? So you've got to have a direction, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess did you mentioned, so when you were at Levene's, you didn't invest when you were there, it was only afterwards when you sold it that you got into it?
The only way I invested at Levene's was in property, and that was property we used, factories, warehouses and that sort of thing, and retail stores. You know, I always preferred, if possible, to buy, because you don't get rent hikes that way. And of course, a lot of the properties that we did buy or build, they were done at a time when inflation was high. So right at the very beginning, the first building I built was the France Street building. And I can remember I had a number of mentors in my life. And one of them was a man called Les Harvey. And Les Harvey developed Parnell as it is today. A great man. And he, when he came back from the war, came back from the Navy, he had been wounded. He was doing sort of land agenting. And he took me to look at you couldn't get property around the end of the war. You couldn't get warehousing and all this sort of things. Everything was short. So he took me to look at a property at the bottom of Parnell. And I'll never forget, we went up a loft and stairs, a ladder, and I said, Les, we'll never get bundles of, big bales of wallpaper that we got from overseas, and that's no good. So we finished up, we bought 2 old houses behind George Courts. And we pulled the inside out of these houses. Why they didn't fall over, I'll never know. And we used them as a warehouse for our wallpaper. And anyway, he got me 100% finance on those houses.
Okay.
Now, I don't remember him. You better edit that out. I would imagine that interest rates were about 2%, and I was probably paying 4%, but I didn't know. I didn't mind, and we didn't. Then we built the building. Well, then after a few years, we decided that it was all too small. We needed a big one, so we found a site out in Papatoe, and I went to the insurance company. We had a mortgage on the original building, but of course, because it had gone up in value with inflation, we could raise more money on it, which we did, which gave us the deposit on the land to raise money on the next building. And that's, I think Bob Jones in his first book said that this was a good way to go. Well, I did it before Bob wrote it in his book, but I believe that he was right.
Okay.
It's not quite so much today because the inflation isn't there as it was.
Yeah. And today, is it quite hard, I guess, evaluating all the opportunities that you must get in terms of investment? I can imagine a lot of people would come to you and say, I've got this idea and I want to start a business. And how do you look through them all and work out what are the best ones?
We look at them. One of the very important things is the people. As far as I'm concerned, I won't go into business with somebody that doesn't appeal to me. There's somebody who I don't feel completely comfortable and happy with. There may be nothing wrong with them, but I'll only go into business with people that I think are good people and and honest and all that sort of stuff. I check people out before we go rushing in, and then we look at the business proposition and the idea, and as I say, some of them work and some of them don't. We have people here who in effect do that job. One person in particular sort of evaluates things, and then we have close looks and meet the people and all that sort of and follow it through.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess so. Is there a bit of a criteria of the types of business that you like to get into in particular?
No, we're into all sorts of businesses. We have an involvement in carbon fibre business, in a film business. The probably biggest investment is in the glass house, the horticultural business, I should say. And we've got a distributing business. The guy who came to me from school at Levene's,
Okay.
and worked for many, many years until I was out of it. And and he came to me, and the people where he was working, wasn't working out properly. So we've gone into business and importing stuff for different areas, and that's just as things happen.
Yeah, and mainly in New Zealand or overseas as well?
In New Zealand.
Okay.
And
is that because you like to support the country?
Yes, New Zealand has been good to me,
Okay.
and I feel that I need to support New Zealand.
Yeah. And are you still today actively involved in Lewis Holdings and Quadrant Properties, or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not 12 hours a day like I used to be at Levene's, but I take it relatively easy in comparison. But I'm very involved, and I like to know what's going on, and everybody keeps me up to date, and we know what's happening.
Yeah, cool. And what's been the most exciting investment for you over your investment career? The one that you've enjoyed the most and learned the most from? And
well, obviously the Levene business was but since then, I would think that my involvement in New Zealand Hothouse with my partner Brett Wolfe, who I admire immensely, he's a younger bloke, and he is entrepreneurial and good thinker, and it's been very satisfying.
Okay. So who are some of the investors in New Zealand and in the world who you really look up to, and why is that?
Well, I certainly take a little bit of note of Warren Buffett. I read Fortune magazine now. It's mainly American business, and I get some, quite good ideas from that. And you never know everything. You're always looking. I am anyway to find things.
Yeah, and we were talking about supporting young people before, and obviously you've done a lot of supporting young people such as Lydia Ko and so on, and golf, and it must be hugely humbling looking at someone like her career now and seeing how well she's doing.
Oh, look, it's very thrilling for me.
Yeah.
I'm so pleased to see her succeed, and there's other situations that we're involved in, more charitably than sort of, that is, I guess that's not charity, that's helping somebody, but I guess that's charity. But
Outward Bound as well.
Outward Bound and the Yes organisation. There's a whole lot of things that I'm involved in.
Okay, brilliant. And I guess why did you feel inclined to get involved with some of these organisations because New Zealand had been good to you? Is that why you wanted to get involved, or?
Yes, and because I admired what they did.
Yeah.
I admire very much what Outward Bound does. I mean, it takes people and turns their lives around, and they learn about self-esteem and that they can do more than they think they can do. It makes them a lot of them into great people.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys should go.
Yeah, well, no, you should definitely do it sometime. Yeah, and I guess what's next for you? Do you have some stuff that you're still wanting to achieve now that you're working on, or?
Well, we're working on, there's sort of things coming up all the time. We're making decisions about whether we should go to this or that and so on. I'm just at the moment sort of expanding our foundation, the charitable foundation, because I believe that it should be expanded a little, or a bit more than a little, but I'd like to do that. Yeah, so that I'm working on that.
Yeah, brilliant. So I've just got a couple of quick fire questions to finish off. In summary, what would be your sort of top 2 or 3 bits of advice for people wanting to start a business of any kind from what you've learned?
Well, the word passion is pretty important. I think for somebody who wants to start a business or who wants to start a career, whether it be a job or whatever, if they can get real passion about something, one, in my opinion, they've got far more likelihood of success and of satisfaction. So passion is, in my opinion, a very important part of what you do in life.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you guys are passionate about what you're doing, but if you are, you'll feel good and
have a great time
and everything's, and have success. So that's my view on that. The other thing, is people.
Yeah.
The right people. People, you've got to treat them well. They have got to know that you're on their side. They have got to know that they can trust you, and that you're sincere with them.
Absolutely. And I guess one thing I've been thinking about is if you could go back to the start of your business career, back when you were 23 and you took over the management of the family company, and give yourself a bit of advice now of all your wisdom and knowledge, is there something you'd say to yourself?
No, I don't think so. I think that I don't have regrets
Yeah.
about anything, because firstly, regrets are useless. You can't do anything about what's been.
Yeah.
But no, I think I'm very appreciative of all the people who have worked with me. All the thousands of people who have worked with me, at Levene's and since and all the rest of it. I'm appreciative of them, because whatever I am, they have really made, if you know what I mean. And I'm just a person. if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So you must be very proud of the people you've worked with.
Oh, unbelievably proud.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess one thing we usually ask the contributor is the 16-year-old person you were. What would you think of the man you've become today?
I think he was too busy playing sport and chasing girls to think too much about what I am today.
Yeah.
16-year-old. When I was a 16-year-old. Well, I never dreamt that I'd have the success, perhaps, that I've had in life.
Yeah.
At 16 I was going to be a chemist, a pharmacist.
Oh, wow.
And at the end of the war, you couldn't get, it wasn't a university degree in those days, it was an apprenticeship. And the rehab men, the overseas servicemen were coming home and they had first call. So you couldn't get apprenticeships. So next door to my dad and uncle's little paint shop in Cranger Happy Road, there was a chemist. He had a brother in the heart of Erin. And he had an apprentice coming out in, I think it was June or July. So I started working in January for about 17 and sixpence a week, which is $1.75 in today's, but it was worth a lot more then. And I was counting pills and rubbing powders and ointments, grinding powders, I should say, and rubbing ointments and making syrup simplex. I was pretty bored. But every now and then I would be allowed to serve the customer. And I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So I was complaining to my dad all the time because I had to ride my bike from Mount Eden to the Harbour of Erin and back, rain, hail or shine. And I was bored. And he said, well, look, son, he said, as a chemist, you'll only ever have one shop. Why don't you come into your uncle's and my paint shop? There's a ready-made shop for you. So I thought, that's a good idea. I can ride to work with Dad in the morning and home in the evening, sit down the back, read books and serve the odd customer. So I went into the paint business. And
the rest is history.
That's how it started,
Yeah, brilliant. So to finish off, Sir David, I mean, you've achieved some amazing things in your life. So can you please look down this camera here and tell us, what are your wise words for the people of New Zealand?
My wise words for the people of New Zealand. Well, I think for a fulfilled life, if you can have passion about what you do, what your occupation is, what your interests are, whether they be charitable or whatever. If you can have passion about things, it's much better. The result is, in my opinion, much better, and you are much more fulfilled. And the other thing is, it's very important to concern ourselves about the people of New Zealand, and it's important to understand what people are all about, and in my opinion, life is all about people. I guess you could live on a desert island and eat coconuts and fish, but without, you could exist on a desert island eating coconuts and fish, but without people, I don't think you'd live.
David Levene, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Cheers.